Good evening, and welcome to the seventh evening of the Creative Communities Culture Conference. My name is Kevin Kelly. I'll be your moderator today. This conference is presented by the Culture Alliance in the heart of Georgian Bay with the support of Rogers TV. The Culture Alliance in the heart of Georgian Bay represents the Beausoleil First Nation, the towns of Midland and Penetanguishing, the townships of Tay and Tiny. We recognize that this region is represented by this region that is represented by the Cultural Alliance is located on the land which is the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Lake Huron and Lake Simcoe, now known as Chippewa Tri-County. They are made up of Beausoleil First Nation, Rama First Nation, and the Georgian Island First Nation. This territory is within the Pre-Confederation Treaty 5, Treaty 16, Treaty 18, and included within the Williams Treaties of 1923. We also recognize that this region is located on land which was once the territory of the Huron-Wendat, and that our communities are home to many citizens of the Métis Nation in Ontario, and to a large and diverse community of Indigenous peoples. We're grateful for the sponsors of this conference. The sponsors of this evening's conference are ServiceMaster and the Tay Public Library. We express our thanks to them for making this program possible, and we hope that you'll have the opportunity to thank them as well. We also express our gratitude to the Simcoe County Tourism for this conference sponsorship, and Rogers TV for the technical support. As you know, the theme of this conference is Obstacles and Opportunities, Finding the Path to Success. The theme of this evening's session is turning technological obstacles into technological opportunities. From time to time, we've all cursed technology. I know I have, but most of us would be lost without it. Our panelists are involved with technology, and they are here to help us, guide us on the path from technological obstacles to technological opportunities. For the first hour of this evening's program, we'll be featuring three special panelists. I'll introduce them in more detail later, but for now, let me welcome them. I will do this. Inga Petri is engaged in digitizing the performing arts, and today Inga works on dozens of national and regional digital initiatives from her home in Whitehorse, Yukon. Give us a wave. Tammy Lee is a career arts manager who has 30 years experience working with and leading national and international arts organizations in dance, theater, and contemporary art. And Bryce Weinreid is the operations manager of Museum Hack and the creative operations manager for its sister organization, Team Building. She is passionate about bringing new experiences and an appreciation for art and storytelling to clients all over the world. Each of our three panelists will speak for about 5 minutes to introduce our topic, and then I'll moderate a discussion with them about issues that arise from their presentations, and we'll consider the role of technology in finding paths to success. At about 8 p.m., we'll conclude our discussion and bring you into the conversation. We'll open up the dialogue for everyone, and we welcome your questions and comments, and we'll talk more about that when we get a little closer to 8. So let's get started. I'll call on each of the panelists to make an opening 5-minute presentation on the theme of this evening, turning technological obstacles into technological opportunities. Our first panelist this evening is Tammy Lee. Tammy is a career arts manager who has 30 years experience in working and leading with international arts organizations in dance, theater, and contemporary art. Today, as an entrepreneur and CEO of a company called Culture Creates, she and her team is dedicated to taking on ambitious projects to help the arts thrive. Culture Creates specializes in systematic technology for the arts. Tammy, can you give us a bit of an introduction of you?
Sure. So, essentially, I'm a traditional career arts administrator working very traditional performing arts like 500-year-old ballet and in the visual arts sector. who quit her job to do a tech startup, which is not a normal route for arts administrator. But I actually see it as a really smart thing to do, and actually one of the most responsible things I could do as a career arts administrator. You need to learn new skills, and I actually think starting your own tech company provides the new skills that arts administration or career arts administrators need for the future. So it's a strange path, but I have to give up being an arts manager to actually claim the fact that I am a tech entrepreneur today. So there you go.
Thank you, Tammy.
And I think...
Go ahead.
I think to start, do you want me to start the presentation
yes.
now, or will you want? Okay,
nope,
perfect.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to share my screen with everybody. I'm going to do that right now. Whoops. And did that work?
Yep.
I'm just going to, whoops.
Yes, it's working, Tammy.
Perfect. I'm keying up my slides. And now, whoop, there we go. Looking for it. Let's see. And now it's technology. Now it's not working. It was working before, a second ago, and now it's not. We'll just see how this goes.
We can see your screen, Tammy.
Yes, but okay. What we can do, let's see. What I'm going to do is, but I don't have control of my screen, unfortunately. Oh, here we go. It's all, there we go. It's all good. Okay, so my name is Tammy Lee, and I'm the CEO of a company called Culture Creates. And tonight, because of certain time limitations, I would like to start the conversation and the thinking by touching on a single challenge. And the challenge is the most important tool we have in the arts to reach people has fundamentally changed. And I'm going to say that again. The most important tool we have in the arts to reach people has fundamentally changed. Can you guess what I'm referring to? And I think probably many of you already have. And I'm referring to the World Wide Web, the internet. It has fundamentally changed. And why has it changed? Because of something called artificial intelligence, or AI for short. Now, AI is possible today because of three factors. One is cheap parallel computing power via the development of graphics processing units, or GPUs. We can thank teenagers and their obsession with online gaming for this. Games need cheap parallel computing power to run all those moving images. Two, big data. After 30 years of the internet, we now actually have heaps and heaps of data about our world and ourselves. In other words, we can't get people like my teenage son, more aptly the roommate I don't like living with, to stay off their digital devices and to stay off social media. Three, algorithms. The math is just getting better and better. And in the AI industry, the goal of artificial intelligence is to attain wisdom. And that's the industry that has chosen that word. So wisdom is how the artificial intelligence industry refers to itself. But all that really means is that AI wants to get an answer. However, for AI technology to work properly, it requires a few things, and it starts with one, raw data. Now, raw data are characters and symbols like you would find on a website, but that is not enough. Raw data then needs to be refined into information, and information is raw data refined into a usable form, and that means machine readable. So data in a usable form is machine readable, but that is still not enough for AI. Information then needs to be linked and enriched with semantics to make knowledge. So 3, knowledge is information, data in a usable form that is machine readable and linked and enriched with semantics. With knowledge, AI can then use it to make an evaluated understanding. And the ability to make evaluated understanding means AI will be able to provide an answer. So the web is moving from search engine optimization, SEO, to answer engine optimization, which is AEO. So what does all this mean for you and I? The impact is data in usable form that is machine readable, linked, and enriched with semantics is now the minimal standard to be findable on the web. Take a moment and think about your website or your organization's website. Can you tell me whether it's at 1, 2, or 3? Does anybody want to hazard a guess in the chat, or let me know? Let me know in the chat. 1, 2, or 3. Well, I can tell you the majority of websites in the arts are probably between 1 and 2. So they don't even make it to the minimal standard to be findable on the web. So, to put this into more context, arts organizations can decide to do nothing, and someone else will come along and structure your data or the information, or take the raw data they have on your website and refine it into information, which is data in a usable form that is machine readable, and link it and enrich it with semantics so it becomes knowledge that AI can use. So that's, there's a challenge there, but there's also an opportunity in understanding that problem for yourselves, for the sector, for an arts organization. And if you're not sure about what I'm saying, just ask Siri. What does she really know about the arts or your organization? So I'm going to stop here. We will let this sink in. And I would like to ask you all, please keep this in the back of your head when you're listening to my colleagues speak. So this is just one challenge, and we only have a limited amount of time. And I just keep sort of, the fact that the internet has fundamentally changed in the back of your head when you listen to Inga and Bryce. And we'll go from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tammy. I will call upon Inga next. Inga started managing website builds and interactive media in 1997. She founded Strategic Moves, an insight-driven consultancy at the crossroads of research, strategy, and marketing in 2007. Since 2011, Inga has been putting digital conversations in the performing arts on the agenda when she led a seminal value of presenting, a study of performing arts presentation in Canada. She's been speaking on digitizing the performance arts and co-wrote Digitizing on the Performance Arts, an assessment of issues, operations, and challenges. Today, Inga works on dozens of national and regional digital initiatives from her home in Whitehorse, Yukon. Inga.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I just want to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the traditional territories of the Kwanlundun First Nation and Tanquachan Council here in Whitehorse. When I moved up here in 2015, I started living on territory that is that is occupied by self-governing First Nations. I can tell you that's a very different vibe up here, despite the challenges, and I'm very grateful to be living in the North. What I want to talk to you about for my opening remarks is about what is and what could be. It's my favorite topic. I'm not sure, apart from the physical place in which I live, the sort of, mind space that I seem to be spending most of my time in at this point is really a slight future state, and trying to do the things and help people do the things required to understand this near and midterm future a little bit better. So I just want to show you a couple of sort of notions around that. So what is, what could be? What is pre-COVID is a very different thing compared to what is right now in this moment. So many of us have been in a place where the way we were operating, the way that we were trying to find audience, get them engaged in our work, get them out of their houses, off their couches, out of their devices, right? To have these really cool, interesting live experiences. That's not happening so much right now. So the challenge really isn't anymore about how do I develop my audience in the way that we would have talked about in the performing arts, particularly the more traditional art forms. But the question now is, how do I find a space where I can connect with my audience? And that space has really, really changed. So we used to inhabit a really simple world, right? This is our world. We have a live audience, and there's a live performance. I'm concerned with getting people to the theater, to the house concert, whatever it is that you're doing. Since March, we've discovered that, a really important part of the world is a digital audience. It was forced upon us. We didn't choose to be, all of a sudden from nothing to 100% digital. And we discovered really quickly in March that what people were doing is they wanted connection. One way to connect is through art. I want to see my favorite musicians. I want to have this cool experience. I didn't really care that the live stream from my favorite artist's living room didn't look that great and didn't sound that great. I got connection. Right. And that sense of, human connection in that moment was really important. Then really quickly, we started seeing that there was some of the theaters that had to shut down, figured out how to get enough technology in there for live streaming or for recording and then streaming after the fact. So now the quality went up a little bit. The basic experience didn't necessarily change. And then, quickly after that, people realized that, my goodness, doing a live show in that format is a very different thing from doing a live show to a live audience. Your stage presence isn't the only thing required when you go digital. You have to have a screen presence all of a sudden. So people started pre-recording, and the artist might be bookending and things like that, right? So within a very short amount of months, 8 or 9 months, we're now in this much more complicated world. But of course, it doesn't stop here. So we're already seeing some examples where hybrid audiences, part of your audience is joining digitally, part of your audience might be in the room with you, is either enjoying a live performance, or even on the performance side, you might find a hybrid of some of the show is digital and some of the show is in the room with you, right? That's a whole other challenge that, depending on what your beliefs are about how this pandemic will shake out over the next year or two, I think it's the hybrid audiences and hybrid performances, hybrid experiences that are going to become quite dominant very quickly, where you might have 20 people in the theater with you. You might have, three musicians on stage, but the opening act might get piped in. So this is sort of this is a mix right now of, near, where we are, near future. And that question mark at the bottom of the slide, that's really about saying, so what we know right now is two-dimensional screens. But that's not the only thing that's going to be existing. I'm not sure, Bryce, if you'll be talking about, 360 tours in museums, or if you'll be talking about virtual reality and the opportunities that are beginning to emerge there. But imagine a near or maybe mid-future world where many of us will have a playback device that makes virtual reality something that is useful, as opposed to a small slice of the world having that kind of playback device. And of course, the live, you might also then eventually see permutations where we have a live audience only, no digital audience, but they'll be enjoying things that are essentially digital, right? But it's still a shared experience in a shared physical place. So what used to be such a simple world, live audience, live performance, has become something rather different. The biggest change in the performing arts really is, what is the platform? So when we're physically getting together, the platform for the live arts experience is the theater. It's the stage. It's your restaurant or your bar or wherever those events are happening. In the digital world, all of a sudden we realize that the platform is Facebook, YouTube, Zoom, and other emerging platforms for streaming content. That is a completely different thing. One of the things that I want to point out here is, think about who's making money in this world, which is an important question to me. And I'll leave that question hanging there for a moment. So what I've been working on for the last number of years is to get people energized about these very ideas within the performing arts sector. Back in 2015, I guess one could say ahead of our times, I've proposed a vision for the performing arts that said we need to develop and own our own digital distribution platform. Not Facebook, not Zoom, not YouTube, where those platforms they have ways to monetize, but the artists and arts organizations don't. So we're now in a process where we're securing funding for that exact project. It'll be led out of Alberta and the Yukon, and we're looking to start building out that digital presentation platform beginning in the spring 2021. One of the effects that we're hoping for is that we'll dramatically expand access and engagement, access to the arts, engagement with the arts. We're also looking at ways to re-engineer parts of the business model. So one of the projects I'm actively working on, we're about to start writing code for that. So we've done sort of a 6 to 7 month research process right now about user research to build a thing called the pitch.ca. The pitch.ca will be an online showcase for the performing arts. So it's the business to business aspect. Artists have to showcase, buyers have to see them, right? It's that interaction. And we don't care on the platform whether somebody is touring digitally or whether they're looking for live shows. At heart, the question really that I spend a lot of my days thinking about is, how would the value proposition of the live performing arts have to evolve in order to achieve digital scale? And one of the things that we realized quickly is, if we achieve that, we probably have something slightly different from the live performing arts sector. We might need to find a new name for that art form. We might need to understand that we're using the skill sets that are intrinsic to it, but we might start to feel a little bit closer to, let's say what television is like, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you. You're right. There's lots to talk about. We're going to be talking a lot about that stuff in about 7:30, and then obviously on until 8. Bryce is next. Bryce Weinreid is the operations manager for Museum Hack, and the creative operations manager for Museum Hack's sister organization, Team Building. She's passionate about bringing new experiences and an appreciation for art and storytelling to clients all over the world. She has spoken at National Arts Marketing Project conferences and at the American Alliance of Museums. She has led workshops for the Museum of the American Alliance of Museums and South Texas History and the Museum of South Texas History, Perez Art Museum in Miami, and for Columbia University. She received her bachelor's degree from Montana State University and her master's from Columbia University. Wow. Bryce, let's hear from you.
Amazing. Hi, I'm the American in the group. Please save all your judgments for the end. So Museum Hack is a company that's obsessed with live experience. It's in everything we do. We specialize in giving museum tours for people who thought they hated museums. We really wanted to work to turn museums into social spaces that really encouraged everyone to participate in these cultural institutions. And we also specialized in hosting professional team building activities and storytelling workshops based around museums. So as you can imagine, in March, we really struggled with what our identity was as a company and what we could do. What does a company obsessed with live experiences do when all the museums are shut and live experiences are no longer allowed? Well, we tried to translate exactly what we did into Zoom, into a digital space. and it didn't work very well. We were giving lectures over a slideshow on Zoom, and it was pretty boring. It was pretty boring. So we tried a lot of things as a company, and what really changed for us is when we realized that there are possibilities in the virtual space that just don't exist in the real world, especially in places like museums. So once we started thinking of this virtual world, of the Zoom world, as an opportunity instead of a lesser than option, things really took off for us. And one of the hardest lessons that we've kind of embraced from COVID, from the quarantine since last March, is that there is no one-to-one equivalent between having a live in-person experience and a virtual experience. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the virtual experience is going to be lesser. So some examples of things that we realized and we really had fun playing with. First thing we realized is that geography is no longer a boundary. So this is the case for both guests of our company. We can now give tours to people all over the world, where before we were limited to just 5 cities in the United States most of the time. And this also means that we are not limited by one particular object in one particular museum. So we can draw interesting parallels from things all over the world. We've also started hiring people for the company all over the world. So that's kind of a side benefit of being in a virtual space, is we're able to give new opportunities to people that we just weren't able to before. Then we realized that you can do a lot of things in a virtual space if people are working from home that you can't get away with in a museum. First of all, you can be really loud. Museums don't like it when you're really loud most of the time. You can play with distance. Museums also don't like it when you're really, really close to art. But this time we can use screen sharing. We can use multimedia to let people get inches away from their favorite painting, which the guards always yelled at us before. We can also use this as an opportunity to let people bring themselves to the experiences we offer. We found that in live experiences, we're satisfied to let the experts be the experts. They didn't really want to share with themselves. They didn't want to interrupt. It was a one-way delivery of information a lot of the time, but maybe it's the anonymity of being online, or the fact that there's less pressure since we're so physically removed from each other, that people are engaging in different ways, in ways that we never saw when we were doing live experiences. So we found ways to encourage that. So for example, we will ask people to show us their favorite piece of artwork that they have in their home. So we're learning things about our guests, we're sharing experiences, we're seeing things that we never got to see before. And we also realized that being online is a great opportunity for different types of communication. A lot of people are scared to death of public speaking, so they wouldn't ask questions, they wouldn't engage. But typing something in a chat box is a much lower engagement level. It's much lower level of vulnerability in order to engage. Or we can ask people to share screens, or drop a link to something, or even just like wave their hands and give feedback that way. So there's a opportunity here for communication. And we're still discovering things every day that enhances our experience, that gives us an opportunity that we didn't have when we were physically in museums together. Not that I never want to be back in museums, but what we're learning here now, I think will actually translate into being able to play with physical space within real life events again. And I think it can go back and forth. So I'm really excited for what the future looks like for my company in particular, but how this will affect performances and arts and events and interactions like anywhere. All right. Thanks. You.
Thank you, Bryce. Okay, so we have now heard from all 3 panelists. And so for the next about half hour or so, I'd like to start a discussion. Don't forget, attendees, you'll be able to ask your questions at 8 o'clock, and we'll get you involved. It'll be your opportunity to interact with the panelists, ask your questions, and make some comments. But for the next half hour, the 4 of us are going to chat. So Tammy, I wanted to start with you. I'm hearing a lot of exciting things happening in Inga's world and in Bryce's world. What are some of the things that you're hearing from the two of them that really have you thinking that we could be seeing some really big advancements in the technological side of artists' ability to get out their work?
Well, there's a question that I have for Bryce in regards to that. I just wanted to know, it's a real switch from being in the physical world to the digital world, like only having your audience in those cities that you operate in. Mm-hmm. And now that geography is no longer a barrier and they're using technology, how have you changed how you promote yourself? How have you changed how you reach your audience? Because now it's kind of, you can get them from everywhere. So I imagine you're using digital technology to reach new audiences.
So this is funny. I was going to ask you kind of the same reverse question. We're really, really concerned with SEO in our company right now. Right. And now I'm like, are we 3 steps behind? Is SEO last year's news? Are we behind the curve? And I'm afraid you're going to tell me that we are.
You are not behind the curve. Okay. You need SEO, but you also need to prepare for the future. So the type of digital infrastructure that I'm talking about is really kind of future-proofing your digital information. And AI is changing technology. And what you're talking about in many ways is the entire virtualization of the world, right? So you're making a digital twin kind of a museum and having people or allowing people to have experience both virtually and physically. Listen, I'm a lover of being in the museum in person. I am obsessed with live performances. Right now, I miss attending a live performance. But you're not behind. Yes, you need to do SEO, but there's other things coming along in the future that we need to prepare for. Inga, do you have any? I know you need to.
Let me just add one thought to that to answer the question in a slightly different way. I do a lot of workshops on that very thing, Bryce. So there is a thing called traditional search engine optimization where you're very keyword oriented and there's a few technical things you must do. You vary about your title tags, description tags, the basic things.
Right, yeah.
The world that Tammy is describing in the interim step to get to it is a thing called structured data. So when you do a Google search, you get an answer, right? You don't get blue links anymore so much. But if you're asking about what's on in Chicago this weekend, you're going to discover an answer that has like a Google box with a whole bunch of events in it. If you want to be in that box, you need to use a thing called structured data, using schema.org as your taxonomy, as your way of naming things. And all it really means is, how do I know that Museum Hack is an organization versus a venue, right? By virtue of adding a tag to that name, I can let a machine know whether you're an organization or a venue, right? Mm-hmm. Just like, how do I know what 15 is? Is it a price? Is it the part of an address? Is it a start time? So I use a tag, around date, time, location to make sure that it's unambiguous what 15 might mean, and if it's a price, then that'll be called price, basically, right? So it's that step. It's getting into those answer boxes that you can do today, that you can do right now, and then some of the more advanced things that Tammy is talking about. They're really back-end opportunities, and they're important. Like I keep in some of the work I'm doing trying to build platforms. I keep running up against, we're very concerned with the way users will use it. And it's very hard to keep on thinking about, but on the back end, how do we make sure that we build it so that things like, let's say, artsdata.ca, one of Tammy's projects, can read and understand and use that data as well, so we can get away from having to enter the same information a million times in a million different places. What would happen if we only have to do it once? Right? So there are real benefits to that kind of what they call interoperability.
Yeah.
Blowing my mind. I'm so glad I came today.
Yeah. So and I'm stuck a lot of the time in that really big picture back end structural stuff. So it's hard. I need a pause, or I need a beat just to get down to the ground. But that, the type of infrastructures we're building is called a knowledge graph. And that back-end infrastructure another way is I'm gonna say it another way. You know, Google owns 40% of that search page, right? Mm-hmm. There's journalists that are checking up on Google and all those big, huge multinational tech companies. Google owns 40% of that search page, of that real estate. So that structured data that Inga is talking about gets you into that real estate. You want to be in that real estate. Mm-hmm. There's a flip side. That's not the full story. The other part of the story, which I'm really motivated by, is that, okay, we're going to get into that real estate. And in getting that real estate, you're actually building the back-end infrastructure for Google, which is closed and not open to anyone. So, you know, our motivation as a company and culture creates is, we're going to fix that technical problem, but we're a social enterprise. So we're motivated by how do we increase the number of ways that more groups of people get to benefit from the internet, from opportunities available on the internet. And you get those opportunities when you have access to a knowledge graph. So, okay, great. Get yourself on that Google real estate, but make sure that you build that back-end infrastructure for yourself at the same time. And what I love about knowledge graphs is it's an elegant technology that really promotes working together. It works better when you all work together. So the arts sector can maintain that integrity, work together, increase the diverse groups of people that get to access benefits of the internet. You know, where arts organizations, stakeholders benefit when they both contribute and use data in a knowledge graph. And then you have a data set that is available to others, other innovators outside of the arts and culture world, other technologies that can maybe, and this is where I stay really high, that maybe there's a chance to design and build algorithms that are not just based on business models of large-scale multinationals that, collect and capture wealth for shareholder profit. Maybe there's a chance to build an algorithm based on different values that the arts can promote. So yeah, we're all fighting to get into that Google real estate, but we kind of leave our natural resources for them to pick up. So I'll stop.
Yeah, no, this has been great. What I wanted to pull back a little bit, because in being involved in this conference and being able to help set it up, one of the things that we learned through registration and so on was that a lot of the attendees are individuals, individual artists, all in different realms in terms of music and painting and so on. What could be some of, a lot of what you guys are talking about is pretty deep stuff. So I want to try to make sure that we give our attendees an opportunity to start somewhere that they might be comfortable in starting. And the theme of this is obstacles and opportunities. So what could be some of the obstacles that a young up and coming artist could be realizing, and what are some of the opportunities that are happening right now that these individual artists can take advantage of? I guess, Inga, I'd like to start with you if I could.
Sure. So when we speak about technology, that always feels a little daunting if you're not in technology. But reality is, we all have this in our pocket, some version of this. And this is the most powerful computer imaginable, right? Like, it's amazing how much memory I've got on this thing. It's amazing that I can read documents, print from it. I can ask it what the weather in Midland is, and I will get an answer within, an instant. You have to understand that, depending on your aspirations as an artist, as an independent artist in particular, depending on your aspirations, one of the sort of essential steps you have to sort out is, what is your online presence? Note, I'm not saying what's your website. I am much more interested in people thinking about what is their online presence. Their presence might include a website. That might include Facebook. It might include Instagram. But it might also be only one of those, right? And you might not use it from a marketing standpoint. You might use it from a content sharing standpoint. right? Don't be so facile in thinking about, oh, to be real, I must have a website. I mean, to be real, it helps to have a website these days. But it's not the only thing you need to think about. And I think if you start to think about presence, that might be a language that's a little bit more natural to artists, to creative folks, because you're very concerned about the presence of the piece you're making, the presence of, your stage presence. Think of it in those terms. And then let the technology follow your needs. Right. And then once you've identified, sort of, oh, this is basically what I need, then make sure you don't just build old technology. Like, especially on the web today, what I was trying to sort of get at with Bryce a moment ago is basically to say, if you build a website like we did 5 years ago, then when you're launching, it's old and I can't find it. But it'll look nice.
Right.
Right. But what you really need to do is you need to sort of do a couple of Google searches. Maybe you need to find some of the workshops I'm doing. There's a bunch of other resources to say, what is a contemporary web presence? So Google semantic web, Google structured data, go Google perhaps web 3.0, some of those buzzwords that you're very familiar with, and you'll discover that there's some very easy things you can do today to actually rise very quickly if you're doing a couple of things correctly. To do them right doesn't take any more time than to do them wrong.
Bryce,
you just have to know what they are.
Absolutely. Bryce, I mean, you obviously took some of this when you guys started up with Museum Hack and so on. Can you give us some examples of some of your challenges when you started and some of the opportunities you're certainly seeing now?
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to bounce off what Inga is saying and saying, once you have your web presence down, now it's time to get your web presence down. One of the easiest ways now, I know, right? One of the easiest ways to kind of, everybody's really bad at this right now. Everybody's really bad at it. They're getting really better. People are doing innovative things, but as a whole, like, people are still struggling. People have not really set high bars yet on what an online experience, what online performance is like now. So it's really simple to kind of put yourself at the head of the pack with a few basic things. One of which, the easiest which I can recommend today, is playing with space. Look at us. We're all sitting approximately 2.5 feet away from our cameras. This is what most people do when they go into a Zoom meeting, any sort of like virtual space. By doing something as simple as like playing with your camera, you're instantly telling an audience that this is going to be slightly different, that this is not going to be like the meeting that they're used to. And so thinking about that, like thinking about what everybody else is doing and what you can do to differentiate yourself slightly, how you can use the technology in a different way, how you can organize yourself and be organized better, will instantly increase your presence after you've already increased your presence.
Tammy, I'll give you an opportunity to follow up on that, because I think we're on the right chain here. I do think that the last few comments will really help people figure out sometimes where to start, right? And I think that sometimes is the biggest challenge is, where do I start? And technology can be such a a scary thing for so many people that's finding the right place to start is I think key personally. What do you think, Tammy?
Well, I agree with what Inga and Bryce have said in regards to technology. And, I have to, I'm from the world of traditional arts administration and live performance and theater and dance and visual arts. I'm actually not concerned about the artist using technology for their creative work. I think artists, when they're presented with tools, they will use those tools to express themselves. All this talk has made me think about Steven Soderbergh a few years back. He's a huge film director, but he wrote fiction on Twitter. He did this little mini project for himself, and he wrote like fiction for these little episodes on Twitter, just to challenge it, just as a fun thing to do. So, you're right. You don't need a website. What is your digital presence? How am I going to use Twitter? How am I going to use TikTok, Facebook? And that website thing, I'm going to just say one thing. My kid is not going to visit a website to go find out about things when he's an adult. So that's the world that we're going towards. So how do you get your information on the internet? and so those are things. But I'm not concerned about the artist. I'm more concerned about how does the administration and that organizational structure use technology. I'm fully confident about the artist. That's my 2 cents.
Inga, I saw you were going to comment there.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been intrigued by is I've seen a lot of art. I mean, even before COVID, I've seen a lot of art online that I didn't have to pay for, not 1 cent. Try to get that back as an artist. Like, once I get your stuff for free, what do you think it's going to take for me to want to pay even $1 for it? It's nearly impossible. So there is a case that some people have made that free could be a business model, but it only works like in the sense of, Google has a business model that's free, right? We all get to use search without paying for it. What does Google get in return? Our data, right? There is actually a reciprocal relationship that we have. And what does Google do with that data? It monetizes it through advertising. So Google on the surface might look like the business model is about free, but it's not at all. So for artists, and individual artists in particular, whether you're a visual artist or an independent musician trying to figure out how to get your breakout sort of stuff happening, there's actually opportunities in the digital world that you wouldn't have if you have to work through the house concert circuit. That takes a long time. Digitally, as Bryce was saying, all of a sudden the world is your oyster. There's opportunity there. You can aggregate your niche audience from around, whatever the English-speaking world, all of a sudden, as opposed to having to find it in Whitehorse or in Montreal. But be aware that you actually have to think about how do you want to make money with your creative endeavors. And when you give it away for free, be aware that it's incredibly hard to get it back. That's one of the reasons why I'm involved in those 2 platforms I was talking about, one of them being the business-to-business platform, but the other one is the public-facing presentation platform. And one of the things that'll be very different about it compared to YouTube, which you can use to put your music videos up, go for it. Try to make money at it. Yeah, you have to have a huge number of subscribers before you make money on those platforms. We're not going to adopt that kind of model. We're going to have an artist-centric model where most of the, more like Bandcamp, where most of the revenue that gets generated has to go back to the artist. And a little bit has to go into feeding the platform, the security, the updates, right? But it's not going to go to some, private conglomerate looking for profit, right? And I think those are some of those, those are social enterprise concepts that some of us are trying to champion. And I think my motivation certainly is I want great art in the world. That's not going to be done by volunteers. It's a fluke if it is. Right? And that's awesome, it happens. But I think the business model, how do I generate and capture the value I create, is a really key question to me.
Bryce, you must have had those conversations with your staff and people. How are you landing? How are you feeling where you can't monetize on people coming in the door now? All of these things that you're trying to do, are you finding success in any of them? You're muted.
You're muted is essentially the motto of 2020 at this point. So we're in a unique situation in that a lot of our revenue comes from corporate clients, which not everybody, not even a small percentage of people gets to have. The flip side of that is we're benefiting from all these institutions all over the world, from the amazing their art we're sharing with anybody. And like Inga said, there's not a lot of ways to make that a reciprocal relationship at this point. We benefit, museums are struggling. And we as a company do give back to the museums that we work with, but they're not making us. There's not that structure involved there. So I agree that that's one of the hurdles that have to be overcome if the things that we're doing, the things that everybody's doing, is going to continue successfully. I do have a question for Inga. This may be completely off topic. What do you think about Patreon as a model for artists? And is it too small potatoes to work well, or is it the right step?
No, I think I think there's types of artists where that works brilliantly. I think what you're doing on Patreon primarily is you're not building an audience, you're monetizing an existing audience, right? So if you have a following, if you have fans, if you have people who care about you, that's great. Can you just go there and build all that from scratch? I think you need the rest of your digital presence to sort of do a little bit more work there. Is that the only model? No, I don't think. Essentially that's the tipping model. It's like how restaurants work, right? Paying minimum wage for servers, but then the tip, brings you up to like your $60 or $70 or $80,000 job, right? Is that a great model for professional artists? I don't know. I think you want to find ways to generate value, generate revenue from the content that you're creating. Not just from the relationship you have with people. And I understand there's a content relationship to a certain degree. Sometimes it's more like a GoFundMe or a crowdfunding thing as opposed to the tipping. There's shades of that, right? But I think you really need to think about, what's the long-term play that you have? How long do you want to be at it? And is it about aggregating fans? Is it about monetizing content? Those are slightly different notions. I think they all can work for different people.
It sounds like, Inga, you certainly talk about strategies and asking yourself those questions. And I think that's something that, maybe Tammy can talk about a little bit is, what questions should artists be asking themselves when it comes to a time to play in maybe a different technological area or try something new? What questions should artists be asking themselves so that they hopefully find the right outlet for them?
I'm going to speak to it this generally. I think artists need to ask themselves, how do they want to reach their public? It is very hard to generalize because I don't know what art form, I don't know what discipline. We're talking about a dancer who's trying to be in a dance company and then tour. And so we're going to fall into what Inga presented, that companies are going to probably do a hybrid model of live and digital. And how is that organization going to monetize that? Or are we talking about visual artists or musicians? It's really different. Are we talking about, and even there's categories within types of artists. In the visual arts world, there are those who want to have a museum show and those who want to sell their work. So are you an artist trying to get the attention of a blue chip gallery so they represent you? Because that's a whole nother, it's really hard to generate. That's a whole nother world,
Gotcha.
And if you want to be seen by a blue chip gallery and get picked up by Pace, in New York, you're going to decide to do things that are very different than putting your work online and trying to sell it. You may not do that. You're going to take a completely different route. So it's hard to generalize. So you artists have to think, why am I doing this? Who do I want to reach? And then technology is going to come because we live in the 21st century, and that we're not printing brochures and posters anymore to get people to come to our gallery exhibit and trying to sell our work. It really all depends. It depends. It's just to think strategically, what do I want to do? What kind of impact do I want to have? And strategize on that. Technology will follow after. It's the strategy first. Technology comes because we all have one of these.
Great. So what I'd like to do now is, because I think that really left us off on a great point for trying to get some interaction with our attendees and our audience, because I think, again, we've got a great panel of technology gurus here, and I really want to encourage all of the attendees that are listening to take this opportunity, ask some questions, try to figure out how you guys can navigate your waters in terms of some of your challenges. So we will have that discussion starting at 8 o'clock. Before we get to that, I'd like to acknowledge our gratitude for our sponsors for this conference. The sponsors for this evening's session are Service Master and Tay Public Library. We also express our gratitude to the Simcoe County Tourism Board for the conference sponsorship and for Rogers TV for our technical support.